In our modern world, you're judged in large part based on your IQ. But what if there were a mental ability more important to your success than IQ that is totally within your control? In this video, I'm going to draw upon my more than 12 years of experience as a published academic, educator, and entrepreneur to demonstrate exactly what this factor is and how you can build it fast. Before we do this though, we have to understand why IQ is inadequate to explain success outcomes in the first place. Yes, the research is clear. Those with higher IQs not only tend to have more academic success, but they also tend to earn more income over their lifetime. In other words, IQ is predictively powerful. However, there are two unspoken assumptions that those who often cite this research make, namely that 1, because IQ is a significant predictor, it is the only predictor, and 2, a high IQ alone is sufficient for academic and career success. However, let's challenge these assumptions and see whether they hold. You see, although I've taught a variety of topics from neuroscience and statistics to sales and marketing, one topic that has been consistently in demand among my clients has been college test preparation, and in particular, the SAT. Neuroscientist Richard Heyer has notably claimed that the SAT is a good overall test of, and therefore a reflection of, one's intelligence. However, after having taught literally hundreds of students how to excel on this test, I've come to realize there's something very wrong with this claim. The SAT is indeed a good predictor of academic performance, and Heyer's critiques of the view that it isn't, based on the idea that most models rely on what's called a restricted range, are valid. However, consider this very real scenario I've encountered countless times. Imagine there are two students, Johnny and James. Johnny is very focused on his studies and wants to do well on the SAT. He has dreams of getting into a top school and building a successful career. However, he has a ton of knowledge gaps. He lacks strong foundations with his math and also makes a ton of mistakes when it comes to making inferences asked for on the verbal section. James, on the other hand, just wants to get the test over with. His parents signed him up for classes and he does the assignments I give him simply to get them done, rather than with a focus on completing them with the aim of learning. However, James otherwise does quite well in school and might have just a mild level of knowledge gaps. Now, here comes the interesting part. How well would you predict each student to perform on the test? Well, time and time again, I've seen students like Johnny make 200 to 300 point gains or more, while students like James more or less stay where they are. To make this even more to my point, let's assume both of them end up with the same score. They both get a 1500 in total. However, here's my next question to you. Does this raw score, as Heyer claims, truly represent each student's actual intelligence level? Well, if we're just considering this raw number, then maybe. But do you also see how much context this raw score leaves out? And so here's often what's missing in our discussions of intelligence and ability. Namely, your relative percentage of improvement in a skill represents a mental ability in itself. And it's a mental ability that is just as important, if not often more so, than general intelligence or IQ. Now, I can already hear you analytical people in the comments telling me, but you're overlooking the fact that the student James innately has a higher potential for improvement than Johnny because he has higher intelligence, or this is a false equivalence because IQ tests themselves don't work this way. But this would be missing the point entirely. Take another look at Johnny and James for a moment. Can you understand the key difference that explained their performance? Well, it wasn't intelligence or IQ. By now, I hope you can see that it was largely about motivation. But if you thought that motivation was the core mental ability I was going to claim beats IQ, then you're wrong. But stay with me, because what I just explained ultimately helps us understand what does. You see, decades of research, especially on the part of social cognitive researchers such as Albert Bandura, have established that what is called self-efficacy is also a key predictor of both academic and career success. In fact, it is sometimes just as good a predictor as IQ. And to understand self-efficacy and how it relates to motivation, consider the following scenario. Imagine me versus Michael Jordan, and we're at the half-court line about to shoot a ball. The winner is the first person to score 3 shots. So who do you think is going to win here? Duh, it's Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan has more experience than me, more practice than me, more knowledge of the game than me, whereas in my case, I just suck at basketball. Now, Jordan knows all of this about himself, and likewise, I know I suck. And these kinds of beliefs we have initiate a positive feedback loop. Jordan knows he's great, And so he has high self-efficacy, meaning quite simply that he believes that if he puts in the requisite effort to score, then he's very likely to get the result he's looking for, namely scoring. Once he scores, that reinforces his belief in his own effectiveness. And research has shown that this process is greatly associated with higher motivation, whereas the reverse is true for me. I know I suck, which decreases my self-efficacy, and my self-efficacy is further lowered when I miss the shot, leading me to tell myself, why the hell bother? And so, do you see how this self-reinforcing loop of self-efficacy and motivation keeps us in a sort of trap? One that is either continuously accelerating us upward or forcing us downward? And so the mental ability that beats IQ is self-efficacy then, right? Still wrong. After all, two things might also be true. One, my sense of self-efficacy can be unjustified. And two, my sense of self-efficacy could have little effect on my life overall outside of this specific task. And so how is this all relevant to which mental ability I'm claiming outperforms IQ? Well, you see, that mental ability is what psychologists call self-regulation, which is a central feature of critical thinking ability. According to cognitive scientist Keith Stanovich's tripartite model of cognition, IQ tests measure what is called the algorithmic mind, whereas critical thinking ability, and in particular self-regulation ability, is controlled by the reflective mind. Now, I've hashed out this distinction in more depth in another video, and so I won't go into more detail about the distinction here, other than to explain the following. The reflective mind is sort of like the master or boss of the algorithmic mind. In the case of Johnny and James, each student's reflective mind essentially instructed each student to use his algorithmic mind in different ways. And it was each one's reflective mind that ultimately determined the differences in academic performance. And in the case of me versus Michael Jordan, sure, there were concrete physical skills involved, but without Jordan's reflective mind drawing upon mountains of evidence of past success in order to convince the algorithmic mind to take specific actions, Jordan, as expert as he is, might have made certain game-ending mistakes. You see, critical thinking ability, where this reflective mind sits, has been shown to be only weakly correlated to general intelligence, which is what IQ measures. And not only has research shown that critical thinking ability is predictive of success, but some studies have even suggested it is more predictive of success. And why? Because while general intelligence, or IQ, is like a steering wheel, critical thinking ability is like the driver. And so it doesn't matter how good your steering wheel is if your driver is terrible. But if critical thinking ability is so crucial for real-world success outcomes, then how do you develop it? Well, we already saw how powerful that feedback loop between motivation and self-efficacy is, right? Yes, but if not properly regulated by your reflective mind, this feedback loop can be extremely destructive in two ways. One, through toxic negativity, and two, through toxic positivity. Number one here is more obvious, and I've seen it time and time again with my students. There's an otherwise talented and intelligent student who takes lessons, but who, for whatever reason, has a whole series of negative beliefs about himself or about his ability. Unbeknownst to that student, he either won't put in enough focused effort, or he'll put in just enough effort to justify something to himself, such as, see, I put in a lot of effort, I did all the homework, but I still didn't improve. This means I'm stupid, and I just can't do it. In order to overcome this, you have to engage your reflective mind, namely by asking yourself the following data-driven questions. 1. What type of effort do top performers put in, and have I actually met that threshold? 2. How do top performers actually perform the activity? Do they engage in specific techniques or methods? 3. How detailed are top performers, and what details do they focus on? 4. What types of environments are top performers typically in, and am I in a relevantly similar environment? If not, how could I put myself in that environment? 5. Which factors are causally associated with top performance versus simply correlated with it? And 6, does my conclusion about my ability, in this case the conclusion, this means I'm stupid and I just can't do it, actually follow from the premises, or is it illogical? And actually, these types of questions are those that I typically ask my own students in one form or another when I can see they're initiating that type of toxic feedback loop. You see, you might be thinking that these questions seem a little bit cold and robotic, but that's just the thing. One of your reflective mind's secret weapons is cold, logical, data-driven thinking. And when we're running on the fuel of emotion, it's this kind of thinking that we often need in order to bring us back to the right kind of motivation. But let's look at number 2 here, because it's just as toxic. In my first business, I did a lot of training in sales and also did a lot of sales appointments myself. As a result, I was massively exposed to the world of self-help and self-help books, which I now tend not to read as much these days because these types of books are usually heavy on claims yet light on citations, and so you never know if you're truly getting good information. That being said, during my experience in sales, I witnessed a lot of salespeople taking the typical self-help advice to stay positive and believe in yourself and so on. And although this advice actually can be helpful, it often leads to a lot of wasted time. And why is this? Well, consider me versus Michael Jordan again. Imagine that I attend a seminar, read a self-help book, or take a personal development course, and now I'm pumped up. I finally believe in myself. Now I absolutely believe I can beat Michael Jordan. I take my first shot, and guess what happens? Yeah, you guessed it, I miss. I take my second shot, third shot, fourth shot, 100th shot, and yet again, Jordan is still wiping the floor with me. But I just keep going and going because, well, I believe in myself. And I've seen this kind of behavior again and again with not only salespeople and entrepreneurs, but also with my own students. As Stanovich has pointed out, people subject to a strong illusion of control are prone to act on the basis of incorrect causal theories and thus to produce suboptimal outcomes. And so, yet again, here's where the reflective mind has to intervene, namely in reverse engineering the result. So now you look at Jordan and ask yourself, 1, what are the factors that have led to his result, whether physical, mental, random luck? Do we have data on this? After all, research shows that even something as simple as an athlete's birthday, known as the relative age effect, can increase the chances of success. 2, which of these factors are within my control? 3, for those factors not in my control, can increasing my advantage with certain skills that are in my control outweigh those? What's the evidence for this if so? 4, given these factors, what are the 1 to 2 factors that have contributed the most to my failure? You see, in statistics, 30 is considered a decent sample size from which we can make fairly accurate conclusions. But the more numbers, the better. And so I'm a big fan of testing with samples of 50 to 100 at a time. And this is a great way for you to test hypotheses and make incremental improvements over time. Do 50 to 100 practice problems. Do 50 to 100 appointments. Drive 50 to 100 leads to your sales page. Present 50 to 100 mini speeches or write 50 to 100 essays. With each set of 50 to 100, change one of the factors you've laid out, note the results, and then move on to the next 50 to 100, but this time changing a different factor while doing your best to keep all others the same. This sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but consider this. It's probably a lot less work than how you're currently doing things because instead of 50 to 100 highly targeted samples, you might have unknowingly been doing the same thing over 1,000 times without even tracking, monitoring, or strategically changing any variables. And so, can you see why this is so effective? It's effective because instead of blind, toxic positivity, you're building up a compendium of evidence for yourself. And while it's easy to fool yourself with toxic positivity, in the back of your mind, your reflective mind, you always know the truth. And so it's only by convincing your reflective mind with real evidence that you'll increase your self-efficacy, increase your motivation and consistency toward your goal, and you'll outperform everyone else who simply has a high IQ or high talent, yet who hasn't committed to mastering their critical thinking ability. If you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking to make a massive impact not only on your own life, but also on the lives of countless others, then be sure to watch this next video.